Thank you, Ed.
There are currently no attendees. It's all yours, Ron.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to start the Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. It is now 6:36 p.m. Going to call to order. And I'm going to start with Mr. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Secretary Lukowitz.
Here.
Vice Chair Colonian.
Here.
Chairman Flynn is here. I believe Mr. Reyes, Mr. Ozenkowski, and Mr. Porcelli are all excused from tonight's meeting, and Mr. Mattson has recused himself on this matter. So we do have a quorum of 5. So Dave, we're going to use your flag, and if we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
To the
flag
Flag.
of the United States
United
of
States
America,
of America,
to the
to
republic
the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice.
justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Okay, tonight, we just have one public hearing on the agenda. It's a preliminary plan for the Oaks at East Shore. Applicant, Tyoke Land Company, LLC. Owners Richard W. Boglin, ETLs, and Richard W. and Herman J. Boglin, CO, and Colleen A. Carlson. It's a proposed major land development of a 33-lot residential subdivision, AP 23 lots 47 and 47.001, AP 32 lot 152, and it's in an R20 zone. Okay, is there anybody here that would like to present for the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Joelle Rocha for the applicants and owners.
Okay, if you want to do just a quick summary, and if you want to bring your professionals up as so you desire. And like I said, it is a public hearing, but we'll hear from you first. And then I will open up public hearing and you can take notes. And then if anybody has any questions after the notes, before I close, I will tell them that.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here before you tonight on preliminary plan review for a 33-lot residential subdivision known as the Oaks at East Shore. The property is located at Assessors Plat 32, lot 152, and Assessors Plat 23, lots 47 and 47.001. The properties are zoned R20. The lots proposed tonight are dimensionally conforming, as noted in the director's report. The access points to this property are Tyoke Ave and East Shore Drive. Last July, for those of you that recall, we obtained master plan approval for the project. At that time, the board directed us to look at a few things at the preliminary plan stage. We'll go through those in detail shortly. Here at preliminary, we're requesting several waivers. 5 out of 6 of those waivers are actually waivers from submission requirements, which consist of, bear with me. The following. We've requested a waiver of DEM permits as well as DOT permits, not submit them at all, but to submit those at final plan approval. You'll hear later from our project engineer where we are in the stage of those. Those have both been submitted. We've requested a waiver of final Kent County water approval. We are also in the middle of that. and we requested a waiver that would allow the design approval from the Coventry Sewer Subcommittee and sewer capacity approval from the council. All of this, again, not seeking to get rid of it completely, but to defer it to final plan approval. We'll certainly be here to answer any questions as to where we are with those. The one that's not noted in your report is the submission of homeowners association documents, which will include maintenance of the structures at the property to be discussed momentarily. Those will be more accurate if they're submitted at final plan approval for the review by the town and your town solicitor. And we can certainly provide you with forms now, but they'll certainly be more accurate when we know what's coming out of this, along with when we have our formal state approvals in hand. The last waiver is a waiver from design standards. It's a waiver from Article 13B, 14B, 10, which are the slope ratio. Your regulations state that slope shall not be less than 3:1. This only applies to lots 1, 31, and 32. Again, all of that detail is going to be discussed by our project engineer momentarily. We have two experts to present to you tonight. One is, again, our project engineer, Mr. Casali, and one is our traffic engineer. The traffic report, as well as all of civil documents, have been submitted to you. At master plan, we were tasked with looking at certain times because of the location with the school. Mr. Bannon will go through those. That is also contained in his report. He will testify that the report shows no changes in the levels of service from existing conditions to build out, and that no mitigation measures are needed. And the other thing that has not been addressed is what are we going to do should we be fortunate enough to obtain approval of this project, both at preliminary and at final. Right now, our thought process is to post a bond, to do a hybrid and do some of the improvements before recording and post a bond for the remainder. My client is a very successful and has a long history of building, and that's typically how he approaches that. So with that being said, unless there's any questions on anything else on anything I just went over, besides the technical stuff, I'll leave to the experts. If there aren't any questions, I'll turn it over to Mr. Casali.
Joel. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, my name's Joe Casali. I'm a registered professional engineer with offices at 300 Post Road in Warwick. If I may share the screen, just a quick PowerPoint presentation to help convey some of the details. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Joe.
So, just by, in terms of where we are, you all know Tioga Lake and the elementary school, Tioga Ave, known locally, formerly as Route 3, Old North Road, Rawlinson Drive, and ultimately East Shore Drive, which services the elementary school. The subject development is going to be done, Mr. Chairman, on 3 parcels. Specifically, Assessors Plat 32, Lot 152, which is a 15-acre piece. We also have Assessors Plat 23, Lot 47, which is a 12-acre piece. And then there's a very small piece also on Assessors Plat 23, Lot 47.001. It's less than a tenth of an acre. It's a sliver, right, to get water access. As Joel spoke of earlier, everything is in your R20 residential district. There are some different amenities and site constraints. We do have a cemetery to the south. We are out of its radius. There'll be no land disturbance within the cemetery or 25 feet thereof. There is an existing residential structure that exists on the parcel, known locally as 244 Tioga Ave. And there's a sewer easement that runs, really bifurcates it. It conveys all of the sewer from the elementary school right down through the town-owned housing development. There is an existing right-of-way that I'll go into more detail in a few minutes that services both Lot 46 and Lot 44 that we are, while we are scheduling the replat, we will preserve in entity. One of the elements we've had done is we've had a local wetland biologist, Scott Rabideau of Natural Resource Services from Burrville, who did an on-site review and found no freshwater wetlands. That was significant to us because we do have a natural heritage area that covers a good portion of most of the property. But this heritage area has to do with aquatic plants. So being that there are no freshwater wetlands, really it's a moot point as these plants will not grow in upland. So our proposal, if you remember, Mr. Chairman, would be to abandon the interior property lines so we can have one large piece, which will be about 26.5 acres. And our approved master plan consisted of breaking that up into 33 lots for single-family homes. It's all going to be serviced on a public road. That proposed road is about 3,200 feet in total length, including the cul-de-sacs. And we have, the width is only 26 feet wide and the right-of-way is 50. And I say only, Mr. Chairman, we received a waiver at master plan to reduce the right-of-way from 60 to 50 and also to reduce the roadway from 30-foot paved to 26. We also received a third waiver at master plan to allow cul-de-sacs within a major land development, major subdivision, and to allow them without islands. The two parcels that you see without numbers on them will be deeded parcels for the stormwater management area. And then we also have that other piece that's going to be designated open space. And I want to focus in on that a little bit. So the open space lot, the plan is that we would have, we would have that existing right-of-way replatted, and then we have agreed with the abutter on lot 48 to have an administrative subdivision to deed her about 6,000 square feet of land. She wants to put a garage on her western side of the house. And so that would leave us with the open space area of about 14,660 feet. We had in earlier correspondence talked about an easement here. There's no need for that. This is going to be just one piece that will be dedicated for open space that we will allow the homeowners association to pass and repass. And we'll get into a little bit of the user groups in a minute, Mr. Chairman. But also as part of our master plan and continuous through our preliminary is, you may remember there's an existing town road that runs through the parcel, East Shore Drive. That's the portion of it in red, but there's also an existing right-of-way in purple there. And so our plan is that town road is a 3-rod road. We're going to replat that so it has a 50-foot right-of-way. So you can see in the red, that is what exists today. And basically, we will just drop that off and keep that as the 50-foot right-of-way. What's important is we are going to preserve access to lots 46 and 44. Currently, they have gravel driveways shown in that magenta color, well, excuse me, that cyan color. And we are going to preserve those driveways, and our new paved roadway will go right up there. And, excuse me, the existing right-of-way will also be preserved. We're just going to leave it untouched. So, in accordance with our master plan, these 33 lots, we're proposing typical 3-bedroom, single-family dwellings. They're going to have 2-car garages, driveways. You see how we've crafted in some of the driveways and the garages. And then in accordance with our master plan, you asked us to consider a variety of entities. One of them was a connection to lot 150, which we've incorporated. So this shaped lot here, Mr. Chairman, is lot 150, and we are proposing a 50-foot right-of-way to interconnect these subdivisions should 150 be developed. And so your plans that you received in your packet should reflect that 50-foot right-of-way. Though that's not scheduled to be paved, but it is scheduled to be dedicated to the town if and when 150 is developed. You've asked us to allow all Coventry residents the ability to utilize Lake Tioga via the open space. After capital consideration, I don't think that we will be able to offer that. There's no parking spaces there, and we feel as though the liability would be detrimental to possibly some of the sales. So we'd like to keep that for the ownership of just the homeowners association, the 13 houses that, the 33 homes, excuse me, that will share in the maintenance and the enjoyment of this. You've asked us for specific manual turning movement counts, and I'll let Paul Bannon, our traffic engineer, address them as I know they're in their report. Number 5, you've asked us to stake the eastern property line that abuts the Twog family. If I'm saying that correctly, that red line is that eastern property line. That was done within a couple weeks after our master plan hearing. One of the elements was asking us to eliminate lot 21 to increase the size of the open space. We've also considered that and are respectfully, have not incorporated that into our design. In terms of what is presented before you tonight for the drainage, this is what we presented as the master plan. Nothing has changed in terms of there's 3 sub-watersheds that really run into 2 large watersheds. So all of the water leaving this site either goes to Tioga Lake or ultimately it goes into the state drainage system on Tioga Ave and then into the Patuxent River, the actual south branch of that. So what we've done is we've crafted our drainage appurtenances right to intercept the water leaving the site so that we can make sure that we meet your code in terms of attenuation and peak runoff. And we think we can do better here because of the good soils that we can reduce volumes and that we can meet or exceed the water quality volumes that DEM wants. In terms of the water, excuse me, we do have a 12-inch water main on Tioga. One thing that's different in your plan set, we've met with Kent County Water as recently as last week, and we have now agreed to connect the existing 8-inch main on East Shore with the 12-inch main on Tioga. It's mutually beneficial to us and to the community. So we will be connecting that through a pressure reducing station and ultimately an 8-inch water main. So that should improve the water quality of the residents on East Shore Drive. And it's going to help the water authority connecting the multiple service gradients. From us, we can provide domestic water to all of our potential buyers. But in terms of fire protection, we have an existing hydrant on East Shore Drive and we'll be proposing 6 future hydrants so that we're able, God forbid, if there is a fire, we'll be able to within 300 to 500 feet, always have a hydrant for the local fire authority to hook up on. In terms of sewer, Mr. Chairman, we're going to take advantage, of that existing sewer easement that runs through the property. We have a force main that does exist on Tioga, but we're going to route everything through the gravity system. We have some force mains in our system. You can see these units to the east and to the west will be force mains. They'll ultimately run into gravity, which is denoted in the red, and then it'll make its way through the parcel, through the housing association, and ultimately to the wastewater treatment plant. In terms of permitting, it's been a process, as it should be. We had pre-application back in February. We took a site walk in March. We had our master plan in July with the 3 waivers granted. We have filed permits with the Department of Environmental Management. And while they've rendered comment, we have recently, as of last week, responded in writing to each and every one of those comments. As have we with the Department of Transportation. We filed application with DOT. They too returned comments, and as of last week, we've responded in writing to each one, as well as this one went to Mr. Crossman through Bruce Hageman, in that we've responded to each and every one of his comments in writing. There wasn't anything from DOT, from DEM, or from the town engineer that I don't think we were able or willing to comply with. There are a few outstanding DPW items, and I'll go through them in detail in a minute. We've also spoken with the Coventry Fire Marshal tonight, and we're here tonight, ultimately, Mr. Chairman, for our preliminary plan approval. And if I may, in terms of the DPW comments, one of the elements, the first one, was they wanted us to improve East Shore Drive from the subdivision to the Tioga school entrance. That's really, it's difficult because you have a 3-rod right-of-way, but when you look at the encumbrances within that right-of-way, including hydrants and mailbox and fences and utility poles, you can see that this is going to be a major undertaking, 17 feet wide in some areas, 26 in the others, utility poles, fences, down to 23 with mailboxes. So it's our proposal that the impact fees that would be collected for the subdivision, we would be happy to write that check in terms of that being used for the improvements to Tioga. I believe we have 33 lots. We are seeking exemptions for 3 of them with 3 lots of records. So with the 30 lots at about $7,500 a lot, it's about $225,000 rough number. The same thing, Mr. Chairman, the 5-foot sidewalk is requested to connect the subdivision to the school. We're proposing the impact fees do that with the roadway. There were a lot of items we were able to comply with. The director asked us to limit the 5-foot sidewalk from the sewer easement from the subdivision to the school, which we've taken off the plans. He asked us to extend the sidewalk on Overlook Circle to driveway 24, which was done. Just want to make sure you all caught that in the red. He asked us on Hillcrest Drive that we extend the sidewalks on both sides of the driveway, which we were easily able to do. The Homeowners Association being responsible for the maintenance of the 20-foot right-of-way and the split rail fence to the open space on behind lot 21 is easily incorporated to our Homeowners Association. He also asked for a crosswalk from lot 20 to 21 with handicap access, which we will be able to provide. Item of note is this path will not be handicap accessible. We don't plan on that being bituminous, but we will be able to provide the crosswalk. Wrapping up here, the access drive requires, the maintenance of the ponds require an access drive, so we will make sure that right-of-way being preserved, that the town has obviously the right to pass and repass or any of our maintenance facilities to clean that basin. A crosswalk at the intersection of East Shore and Tioga, we were not able to provide. The difficulty there is we're afraid that crosswalk is not going to lead anywhere. There are no sidewalks on that east drive, so east side of Tioga, so I'm concerned about directing a pedestrian through a crosswalk and then not having the infrastructure to put him or her back up onto a sidewalk. This was the light systems. We met with Anthony Fire in lighting department. Lighting was encouraged, but it is not required. So at this time, after consideration, we are not proposing lighting. All of the tree specs to be planted will meet the approval of the town engineer. We agree. And with that, Mr. Chairman, as Attorney Roca said, should we receive approval tonight at preliminary, we'll still be back before this board for final unless it is considered that it will be delegated to the administrative officer. I know that was a lot in one breath, but I'd be happy to answer questions of you and members of the board.
Sure. I just want to say on the note 1, all our impact fees can't be designated to road work, I believe. I think that's divvied up between a few different areas. That's the only thing I have to say on what you've just told the board. Is there anybody else on the commission that would like to have any questions for the engineer?
I have one question. The force through the gravity. Oh,
Just
Jim.
state my name.
Yeah, James Kenny, Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Joe, the gravity sewer main,
Yes.
does that need to be upgraded to incorporate the new 33 lots? Or is the size of the main sufficient?
It does not need to be incorporated. Yeah, the size of the main was sufficient. Because it was a gravity main, excuse me. Because it was a gravity main, we're not going to tie into the force main on Tioga. These portions will be force mains. They'll be environmental 1 grinder pumps, and then they'll pump to a gravity system, as you can see in red. And yes, this sewer line was big enough to handle the flows. We looked at both the velocities in the line as well as the retention time in the line, and both checked out.
Yeah, even during peak school hours?
Still, subject to the review and approval of the sewer authority as well as West Warwick Sewer. But to answer your question, yes, everything's okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Chairman, if I may, just on your question, I just wanted,
Go ahead, Joe.
what I meant to say was, we understand that the impact fees are divvied up between recreation and so forth and so on. We are not adverse if you were to use them for the roadway improvements. If that, it's not something that maybe we can select, but if you were to do that, it's the owner's opinion that he would be fine with that.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anybody else from the commission have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Is that you, Rick?
Yes, it is. It's Rick Colunian, Planning Board. Joe, I might have missed this. The open space parcel, is that going to be retained and maintained by the homeowners association, or were you deeding that to the town? And then what was the plan for that?
We will maintain that as part of the homeowners association. We're not deeding that to the town.
That's fine.
One thing we asked was that this will be just for the use of the homeowners and the association and not the general public.
No, that's fine. That's what I wanted to make sure.
We will be deeding to the to the town would be the right-of-way, of course, with the roadway, and then the two lots that contain the stormwater management. But we'll be retaining the open space lot.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure if it was, if you were restricting the use and the access, it had to be maintained by owned and maintained by the homeowners association. And what was what was with the, you're just going to give her that piece of land, the abutter?
I'm not sure if we're just going to give it to her, but
You reached an agreement. Let's leave it at that.
you know, and she's approached us many times. I think her and Bob have come to an agreement. She has a very tight lot, and if you see her home on there, without this, she would not be able to put a garage, even if she went to the zoning board. So we're going to give her enough that she's going to be able to put that garage and not have to seek a side yard setback.
And that's fine. When would she be coming for the administrative subdivision? Because that's part and parcel of your ultimate final plan.
Right, we would have to, as part of our record plan, administratively combine that 6,000 or so square feet with lot 209, giving her about 25,700 square feet.
So you're just going to show that on your plan when you record it as part of her lot and obtain the approval in advance, or are you just going to show it as future parcel to be deeded to the abutter and administrative subdivision to follow? I guess.
No, we'll probably clean this up and do it together. We're gonna, as part of our record plan, we're gonna combine those three lots, divide them, and then we'll also clean up her lot as well.
Okay.
It just makes sense. We're right there, and we'll just do it as part of the record plan.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the commission have anything they would like to ask?
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead, Russ.
thank you. Joe, one thing you had just mentioned and that brought to my mind, you had mentioned the stormwater management parcels.
Yes.
You talked about giving them to the town. It was my understanding that they would be the responsibility of the HOA.
Russell, you're right. Those are separate parcels that are going to stay in the homeowners association, and we will maintain them.
That's what I just wanted clarification
I
on.
got
Thank
my
you.
subdivisions confused. Yes.
Thank you, Joe.
And that will be part of the HOA docs for the maintenance of
Very
those.
good. Thanks, Joel.
Okay, and Joe, before you go, just for clarification, that open space will only be for the homeowners in that development, correct?
Correct. Those 33 parcels will have deeded access.
Okay. Anybody else on the commission?
Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson, Planning Commission. Joe, I was just wondering, can you just state again why, just for the sake of the question, why you left it just for the homeowners? You said it was because of parking restrictions for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, when we've dealt with these in the past, it's tough to scribe in parking areas here and not have an impact on lot 21. And from a liability issue, when this homeowners association needs to get insurance every year, it's awful expensive when it's open to the general public. You know, it's a nice thought. We've done them in the past, but when we play it out on paper, between the insurance, the liability, it ends up being used for the wrong reasons, because you can't stop kids from being back there. Where if everybody takes a share in it and is sort of vested in it, it seems to be a beneficial asset to the town, not a nuisance to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, would you like to continue to your next expert?
Yeah, so Mr. Cannon is here. If there are questions on the traffic report, or would you like him to present the report? I'll leave that to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, if Mr. Bannon wants to do just a quick review of the traffic report, that I think everybody involved would appreciate that.
Okay, I'm gonna leave this on sharing because I have a slide for Paul that he's gonna talk off of.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening. Paul Bannon, associate with Beta Group. We were retained to assist in the local permitting process based on the master plan review that was completed and the request that traffic data be collected and reviewed to determine the potential impact to the local roadway system. As part of that, we reviewed the site plans that were approved at the master plan level to review the points of access and egress to the development to ensure that safe access and egress would be provided. We conducted site visits various times of the day, days of the week to observe traffic operations along Route 3 and within the neighborhood itself. We inventoried the project area for land uses, existing roadway conditions, horizontal, vertical geometries in the vicinity of our proposed access road. We obtained, which was critical in the addressing comments from the town, we obtained automatic traffic record counts both on Route 3 and within the neighborhood on Rawlinson, obtaining 7-day, 24-hour data. We also counted and that allowed us to determine the variation of traffic over the course of the day and when the peak hours occurred, especially with the school within the neighborhood itself. And then we also conducted manual turning movement counts at the Route 3 intersection with Rawlinson. Looking at the future conditions, we estimated how many trips the 33-unit single-family home residential subdivision would generate, and then we assess the safety and operations of that future condition. As you were aware, Tioga Ave is a state road, Route 3. In the project area, it's approximately 28 feet wide, 35 miles per hour. That road would provide our immediate access to the new subdivision. We are connecting directly to that, not requiring access via Rawlinson or any of the other residential streets in the neighborhood. We would provide direct connection to Rawlinson Drive. That provides major access into the neighborhood, including access to the elementary school. So that road today is actually operating as a collector road within the neighborhood, providing access to the school, which can have a peaking impact on traffic conditions. Just looking at traffic, Tioga Ave services approximately 12,000 cars per day in this area, which translates into 800 vehicles during the morning peak, 900 during the 950 during the PM peak. Rawlinson Drive on a daily basis during school conditions services 1,000 vehicles per day, and around the school peaks it's 220 total vehicles, 125 vehicles. Looking at the future condition for this size and type of land use, we would expect that they would be during the morning peak hour, approximately 25 total trips. That would be 6 entering and 19 exiting. During the PM, a total of 33 trips, 20 entering and 13 exiting. Looking at that future condition, assigning some of the traffic to the local neighborhood streets, looking at our proposed access, and also looking at Rawlinson Drive. Both would operate efficiently at a level of service D or better during those peaks, typical of any side street along that section of Tioga Ave. And we feel that safe and adequate access, no site distance restrictions at the proposed access location are there, and that safe and adequate access can be provided to this new subdivision. Available for any questions.
Okay, Mr. Bannon, I have one. I read through this lengthy traffic impact study. On pages 7 and 9, and also on page 15 of the review, it states that it calls for some small trees and vegetation that should be addressed that affects the site distances. Could you respond to that? Will you be taking care of that on, and I believe that's on Tioga Avenue?
Yes, that's along the existing property frontage of Tioga Ave. So that will be, we don't want to clear cut everything. So, we would look at what vegetation would need to be trimmed back or removed to maintain those proper sight lines that the geometry of the roadways provide.
Agree. I'd like to keep it as natural as possible, but I don't want it to affect any of the site distances coming in or out.
Correct. Yeah, we assess that and just remove what's necessary.
Okay, that's all I have. Is there anybody else on the commission that have any questions for Mr. Bannon?
Yes, Sandy Lukowitz from the planning. The Tioga Lake Association, are they aware that there's not going to be access to the water?
That would not be a question for me.
So,
Go ahead, Joelle, if you want to answer that.
so, we're not aware who they are right now, but they don't have the access right now. It's privately owned right now. There's I think Joe went over the issues with providing public access to that. But yeah, I'm not familiar with them. And it's not like this is something that exists now that we're taking away, but.
Hey, Sandy, to further that, I live in Tioga.
Right. Yes.
Actually, a couple streets over from this.
Yep.
In all of our deeds of the existing folks, we have access via the public right-of-ways. So understanding what Joelle is saying, this development would have its own dedicated access. I'm not sure how the deeds for these properties would read. If they would also be allowed the right-of-ways as well.
Okay.
Not getting off topic with Bruce, Paul's report and everything, but it wouldn't be taking anything away from me as a Tioga resident because I have access to Tioga Lake per my deed for the right-of-ways.
Okay.
Since that is private property, I don't have access.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
That makes it clear?
Yeah. Thank you, Joelle.
No problem.
Go ahead, Rick. You have a question?
I do. Before I get to my question for the traffic engineer, I would also like to comment. The recently approved East Shore subdivision, I believe they dedicated that piece right next to the lake for public access. It's just on the other side of the school, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe it's like 3.4 acres, if I remember right.
And it fronts right on the lake, and that was deeded to the town for public access. But my question for the traffic engineer is, did you say there's 1,000 cars using Rawlinson Drive during peak periods?
No, over the course of the day.
Over the course
Total.
of the day?
Yes.
So
Yes,
now we have a subdivision that provides, assuming a great deal of that traffic is going to Tioga Elementary School. Do we envision cars that may want to cut through this neighborhood, maybe to avoid a backup at a stop sign or something else to get to the school, where they'd cut through this neighborhood and then end up down on East Shore Drive coming into the school from the other direction?
Yes, we would anticipate a percentage of traffic coming from the north to, turn left into our site before they head down to Rawlinson. So there should be a reduction or some sort of reduction in traffic on Rawlinson as a result of an additional access point to the neighborhood in the
And
vicinity.
what are your thoughts on the constrictions that exist on East Shore Drive as you leave the subdivision and approach the school, where some of those road widths are down as low as 23 feet with mailboxes and other minor obstructions along the, whether they encroach on the town right of way or whether the road just wasn't platted wide enough?
Well, a physical width of 23 feet is sufficient for, easily sufficient for two-way travel, especially low-speed 15 mile per hour, which occurs along there. If there are physical obstructions that extend out into, i.e. mailboxes, that's an enforcement issue that should be addressed by the town.
So that being said, and I know we had the discussion, and Joe and Joel, this kind of goes back to you guys. If there's any way, maybe rather than responding to written comments, maybe there's a happy medium between the Public Works Director and some improvements. I mean, traffic calming, I'm not opposed to narrow road as long as it's safely passable. If he was just looking to have the pavement upgraded and then keep, if they're narrow widths and it results in traffic calming in a school zone, I think that's ideal. But usually the town gets more bang for its buck when the developer makes the improvements as opposed to the town following all of its purchasing regulations and I forgot what it's called there, the Davis-Bacon Act, where you have to pay prevailing wages and all the other stuff, and you guys would be right there. So again, I realize it's outside the limits of your subdivision, but there might be a happy medium, and then you would just get credit for that improvement, and you would not have to pay that portion of the impact fee.
So I'll get to the impact fee in a minute and the reasons we bring it up. But one of the reasons we presented this as part of the PowerPoint presentation was to show, this is one, it's outside of our subdivision, but additionally there are easements that would have to be obtained from private property owners. There's issues of encroachments into that platted right-of-way. It may not be the paved right-of-way. And it's all things that would involve, it's pretty extensive that a private developer couldn't really accomplish to widen or get those encroachments out of the way. When we brought up,
I agree with what you're saying.
So when we brought up the issue about utilizing the impact fee, and I understand, I'm intimately familiar with your impact fee, that 1,900 of it is really for DPW, and that may not get you the whole way. And I'm not here to give you legal advice. Mr. D'Agostino is more than competent enough to do that, but your impact fee ordinance provides for what I think could be a potential mechanism. It provides for a fee in lieu instead of this. And there, I think between me and Mr. D'Agostino, we could be a little bit creative in saying those payments of the impact fee in 30 payments or whatever it is could be a fee in lieu, and it could all go to those offsite improvements if that is an issue for the board or the DPW director. It's a substantial amount of money. I mean, you're talking $227,000, and it's a 33 lot subdivision. I just, some of the other items involved in this were already upgrading water and sewer. So those portions of the impact fee, I don't know that those would be usable. So it is a creative way to put that whole chunk towards offsite improvements with the town who's, has the ability to enforce the encroachments or deal with it that way.
Right, and we've had other subdivisions where I think the town may have taken the steps to, whether they get removed or they don't get removed. All I was suggesting is, even for the asphalt, if it was just an overlay on what's there, you would get credit for that and be able to take it off the impact fee. And your costs are far less than what it is for the town. So all I was suggesting is a sit down with the Public Works Director to say, hey, if I'm not going to do any encroachments, I'm not buying any easements. Tell me what it's going to take. I realize I'm not going to get a standard width road over there, but you might want traffic calming. If what we're talking about is you want me to lay some asphalt, show me where you want it, tell me how much, and then give me a credit off my impact fee for what I've spent, and everybody's happy.
Understood.
My suggestion.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a different conversation. The what's been presented to us is pretty significant, rather than, you know, a resealing or whatever it is of portions of that road. I think that's an easy conversation to have versus widening the road, adding sidewalks where people's mailboxes and plantings are.
Right.
So that's, you know, that's fair enough. But we just wanted to present the fee in lieu as, you know, an option for the town if that's available. It may be of some interest. The only other thing I wanted to add with respect to this traffic cut through, just to put it on the record, if you recall from master plan, we didn't show that 50-foot connection because we think, you know, if lot 150 is developed, you're now connecting two subdivisions through this, and that, you know, the traffic through that's going to bring a lot of traffic through this, and that's initially why we didn't show it. And we were opposed to it. You know, we were instructed by the DPW that he insisted on it. So we have shown it, but I do think that's a discussion that the board should have, because it does become a lot more traffic through that way with that 50-foot right of way. So it can certainly be there for whatever the town wants to do with it. I mean, we propose to deed it over when the roads are accepted here, and the town can choose what they want to. It might get a little hairy where if once the town accepts it, it has to be a connection. But we did want to bring that to the board for your thoughts on it. So.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
And
Thank
Joel, as far as the roadway, this is Mr. Flynn. As far as the roadway, I know your client did a very good job on Luba Road. I don't know if he jumped through hoops on easement on that road, but I have to commend him for that. Probably did the most off-site rehab that I've been on the board since '07. I do have to commend him for that. This looks like a very small area compared to the length of Luba Road. If the DPW director really insists to become partners with him, I agree with Rick that it would be less costly for you to do it than him. And that's really going to be on the list, because I don't think the town really has the money under the circumstances to be doing a lot of improvements, but that's definitely over my pay scale. But I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Understood. And like I said, you know, there's a different conversation between resealing portions of the road versus taking stuff out, relocating utility poles. That's not something, you know, it's not the traffic for this subdivision that's causing those issues, and that's where we run into the issue.
I agree. I agree the town would have to take some steps to clear what they want paved, and then you would only be responsible for putting in infrastructure with what is both physically and legally available. And then you would just get credit. If it works, if there's still no meeting of the minds between Public Works and the developer, then so be it. You pay your impact fees and you move on. I agree. We did ask to connect the road so these neighborhood kids wouldn't be going back out to Tyoke Avenue, and that's why we also asked for that connect the road to the next plat. It's just an unfortunate situation. The town has a lot of substandard roads.
Right. And we have no problem continuing the conversation with the DPW director on a more limited, realistic, you know, basis.
And maybe the DPW director would be okay with a crack and fill and sealer, just to somewhat improve that roadway if it's really something that's really he's concerned about.
Right.
So maybe there's something that you can help him out with, and he can help you out with to get this thing done.
Understood.
And Mr. Chairman, one just to follow up for Joe, what was the narrowest physical width? I'm not talking about the legal width, but taking into account physical constraints. 17 feet, I think you said at one.
Yeah, about 17 and a half feet.
Okay. And was that because of primarily mailboxes and landscaping, or are we talking utility poles and?
It was utility poles fences, there's a variety of things out there.
I meant at the 17 feet constriction.
Let me get back to it.
That's right at the end, right, Joe?
Yep.
I can't
You
see
can
it.
see there.
I can't see it because the photos are in the way. There it is. Okay.
Yeah, that's right at the very end where we're tying in.
There's not really a physical constraint there. Or is that the actual legal width?
No, the legal width is a 3-rod right-of-way.
I'm sorry, who is speaking right now?
I'm sorry, Heather, this is Joe Casali.
And this is Rick Calooney, and I asked him if that was 17 feet was the legal width. So I'm looking for what's the physical constraint where the 3 rods other than utility poles, or if it is utility poles, like when you get up to the end of that fence right there. Yeah, okay, 26, yeah.
Yeah, Rick, where that 17 feet is, if I'm not mistaken, right out of the picture behind that, I think there is another pole.
Yeah.
Joe, go back to that 17 foot. Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, right where it goes to the right there, behind, out of the picture, I think there is another pole back there, if I'm not mistaken. You may correct me, Joe, if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think I got a better shot of it. So that's where there's a pole in that general area. I don't have a picture of it. I don't have a capture of it.
All right, this is Rick Calooney, and again, I believe that relocating utility poles is going to be cost prohibitive. But I'm just suggesting a conversation with the DPW director to say, come up with something reasonable through there. If the width's 20 feet, that's actually a nice traffic calming width as you go into a school zone, and they can post the speed limit to 15 to 20 miles an hour and be done with it. If he's just looking for roadway improvements in terms of asphalt, that's one thing. If he's looking for total road reconstruction with sidewalks, it may be cost prohibitive, and I'm not mandating that.
No, if you want to give me 10 minutes, I can run down there and look.
Thanks, Mr. Kenny. We will absolutely agree to further the conversation with Public Works Director. And, we've responded in writing to all of this, but I want to show him all these pictures, or we'll walk the site and see what makes sense.
Thank you. That's what I was suggesting. Sometimes the writing doesn't work.
Anybody
Mr.
else
Chair-
on the commission have any
Mr. Chair,
questions?
yeah, Mr. Chair, Glenn Anderson, Planning Commission.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Just while we're on it, Joe, I know you're unobligated to put up the street lighting system, but I don't know, maybe I missed it. I was looking for it. Is there going to be a light at the intersection of Route 3 to show that road and make it visible, or is I don't know if that's on the traffic impact or on your end?
Yeah, there's no lights proposed. We expect to have the roadway light from Tioga Ave. We'll certainly have street signs. But we're not proposing street lights within the subdivision.
Right, but yeah, that's what I was asking. There will be one right at the intersection of Route 3, though, right, to light that road up?
Not
Is that no?
specifically.
Okay.
Let me just check.
I think I don't know, at the very least, sometimes it's difficult, nighttime come to see that.
Paul, you got an aerial?
Yeah, I'm just because there are street lights along Tioga in this area, so let me just see what the nearest one would be.
think there's a light, it's Jay Ozenkowski. I think there's a light at Rawlinson, the older subdivision, the main entrance to Tyoke.
I just got to imagine you'd want good visibility, especially on that road, and depending at nighttime if it's feasible.
Yeah, they're pretty much on every other pole and or intersections.
Well, whether if it's not there, I don't know if it's too late to figure something in or even talk about it. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, typically municipalities, that's a municipal request.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm going to share my screen for a minute. I'm looking at a street shot. I'm going to show you there's a light right there. Just humor me for a moment, please.
Okay, thank you, Russ.
I think it's a Jennifer.
Okay, you see right here? This is your property, correct, with this for sale sign? Is that the existing home?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, there's a light right there. See that luminaire right there?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So, I mean, it couldn't get any closer to the access, really.
Oh, that's great.
Nice. Good.
Okay, does that answer everybody's question?
That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Russell.
And
no problem.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up to that. This is Rick Kalunian.
Go ahead, Rick.
Joe, you had a discussion with the Coventry Fire and Lighting District about the streetlights, correct?
Right, so we met with the Coventry Fire Marshal, and then we're in a split zone. We're actually in the Anthony Fire District, and so we went to the Anthony Fire and Lighting.
Yeah, that's Coventry. Yeah, that's what I meant. Not Central Coventry. That's Coventry.
And so, their response was that it's recommended that because the town recommended it, but it's not required to be done. That's what the Anthony Fire Marshal sent us via an email.
Right. And if it's not my mistake, and Ron, you may know the answer to this, they have to pay the bill, right?
Well, I can only say what we do in Central, and Mr. D'Agostino could also reply to that. But I know in Central, usually the Homeowners Association will pay for the installation of the light and the maintenance, and also pay the bill on the light. As far as Central stands, is that right, Mr. D'Agostino? I'm not sure what Anthony does.
Well, that is correct. And I will say that both Anthony and Central Coventry Fire Districts have ongoing litigation with National Grid regarding payment for streetlights. So I think that, well, I can only speak to what Central did because I'm aware of what they did. They notified the town that they would no longer be paying for streetlights. So the Homeowners Association would therefore be responsible for the installation and the electricity charges for streetlights going forward. Obviously, this development is not in the Central Coventry Fire District, but I think Anthony probably would take the same position given their litigation with us with Central in this case.
Okay, so this is going forward, but the existing streetlights on all the roadways in towns are paid by the Fire and Lighting District.
That is correct, yes.
So my point was that's why they're not pushing the issue, because they don't need any more litigation. They don't want to pay the bill, and if they've got this other policy. Okay.
Correct.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
It wasn't that the developer was trying to skirt. He went through the effort of meeting with the fire district, and they were like, we don't really care about streetlights anymore because we're not going to pay for them, and nor are we going to maintain them.
Good one.
I'm all set.
Okay, Rick. Anybody else? Anybody other questions? For anybody, any of the professionals that spoke tonight? Okay, Joelle, you have anything else to add before I open up public hearing?
I don't. I would just ask for an opportunity if there are any public to respond.
Yeah, so normally what I do is I will I will open up public hearing, and then just take notes of anybody that would like to have any questions answered. And then you can answer them, and then before I close public hearing, I will always ask if there's any other rebuttal for what you have presented.
Thank you.
I think I will entertain a motion. And also for clarification, Heather, I think I said Mr. Ozenkowski was not with us tonight.
Yes, and I did.
Ozenkowski is with us tonight. I just wanted to put that on record. Okay,
Thank you.
I'll open up public hearing and we'll do a poll. So I'll entertain a motion to open up public hearing.
This is Jim Kenny. I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
Okay, could I have a second?
This is Sandy Lukowitz. I second.
Okay, hearing that, a second, I will poll the board. Mr. Ozenkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Colonian,
Aye.
and Chairman Flynn says aye. Okay, public hearing is open. Is there anybody from the public would like to speak on this project, for or against?
Now, Mr. Wazika, I understand I have one gentleman with his hand up. So if I click allow to talk, that will allow him to speak, correct?
Yes, it will, and that will bring him into the meeting.
Okay, his name is John Turog, and he would like to speak. Mr. Turog, can you hear us?
Mr. Turog, take your mute off on your mic.
Okay.
Can you hear us, Mr. Turog?
Yes, I can.
Okay, please state your name and address for the record, and then just ask your question.
John Turog, 232 Tyok Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
So now, you want me to ask the question?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I have a few. When they were showing the map, the drainage that was going to come into Tyok Avenue, and the way the arrows were, they went over my property. So they're going to direct water over my property onto Tyok Avenue? Can they do that?
So, Mr. Turog, can you please ask all your questions, and then the professionals will answer them, and I will not close public hearing if you have any more questions after they answer your questions. Is that okay?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So you heard my question.
We heard the first one. Do you have any more that you would like to ask?
Yeah, I'm worried about the drainage because right now, the Bolden property on your maps is on a steep hill, Tyok Hill, and it's all heavily wooded. When they tear those trees down to put the houses in, the water's just going to flow on the property. And now the basement fills up with water in the spring. So I'm wondering, what they're going to do about that.
Well, I can say one thing. They can't increase any runoff by law. So if you want to finish the rest of your questions, and then we'll see if anybody else in the audience have any other questions, and then the professionals will answer the questions one by one, and then I will open that up for the public if they have any more. Is that okay?
Okay, my next question is, like I said, you can't picture those maps, but that's a steep hill. How do they do it? Are they going to level off that whole section of Tyok Hill, or are they going to build like houses, clinging to the hill? It's hard to understand that, what it is. As far as the connection between North Road and East Shore through, there's the Bolden property. The person at first, she said that they were willing to do it. And then as the night, wore on, she said they weren't really willing to do it. So I wish that, I don't see why they can't do it. And as far as widening the road on East Shore, there's plenty of room on the school side of the road. to plenty of open land where that 17 feet, 17-foot area is of the road. There's another 50 feet that, beyond that you could use to widen the road. So it's not really true that there's not any room there. There's, like I said, there's plenty of room. Now, the other thing is, I noticed that the retention ponds are going to be right on the borderline to my land. I don't think that's a good, I think that, because, someday, hope in the future, there'll be houses built there and they'll have retention ponds in their backyard. I can't see that as being like appropriate. Now, the other thing is that, even though they got all this, they're concentrating all their building efforts going through the entrance on my property into their property. And I told them they can't do it, but they still keep doing it. And they put these big ruts in the road. And once they got in there to cross over to the Bogan land, they put these big ruts in the road. So I'm worried about, their construction. They seem to have no regard for doing things the right way. I went to, like I said, they got 300 feet or so on the Tyoke Avenue. When are they going to put in an access that they're going to go through on their land? The other thing that, is annoying is that his crew there, they cut down a tree on the top of the hill that completely blocks off my access to the road that goes to the back of my property. And I told them about it, and the guy answered with a string of vulgar comments about my ancestry and I don't know, all different things. So I guess that's about it. So if you want to go ahead.
Okay, staff, I'd like to ask if there's anybody else that wants to speak publicly on this.
With the screen shared, we can't see that. You're gonna have to
No,
kill.
I can see it. I have no one else with their hand up.
Okay, so Joel, could you answer his concerns, please?
Yes. So I have 6 issues that were brought up. I will leave the drainage to Mr. Casali to go back through, and as Mr. Chairman, as you noted, pursuant to the DEM permit, there can't be any net increase in runoff. But I'll have Mr. Casali address that. As to the 50-foot connection, I think was one of the issues. That is part of the plan. I just raised the issue to present it to the board of, whether the board wants to cut through. It is shown on our plans. The access through his property, we have staked out that property line. We are not using that property for any access currently or ever. And then the tree, there was a tree removed so we could stake the property as was requested of us, but that there's no ongoing issue about a tree at the property. That being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Casali with respect to the drainage.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, so just looking at the current drainage, let's get to the right. So when we look, most of the land, it flows over the housing authority, as well as onto Tyoke Ave. And then this portion actually runs from Mr. Twog's land through our property and ultimately to Tyoke Lake. So what we're trying to show here is ultimately any water that goes off of this site either moves in a westerly direction to the lake or it'll move in an easterly direction through the housing authority into the state-owned drainage system. So we need to confirm to the town engineer that we're not going to have any impact on the abutters, including the housing authority. We're not only going to have a reduction in peak runoff, we're going to be able to reduce volumes. We also need to prove to the DOT that we're not going to have any adverse effect to their drainage system, which we're showing reductions in both peak runoff rates and volumes, and as well as to the state DEM that we're mimicking existing conditions to Tioga Lake, showing not only reductions in volumes and attenuation in peaks, but we're not going to preclude any water or dry any water up going to the lake. As to why the basins are where they are, you know, the basins are designed to be at the low point of the property to collect the stormwater from the respective watersheds before allowing it out. So in this case, all of the water that is going to float and go to the Tioga pond, we're going to intercept where we can at the eastern portion, or western portion, excuse me, of our land before we clean and release that water. And the same here, we have different drainage appurtenances at this easternmost point so that we can intercept all of that water and clean it and before we let it go its existing way. And then there's one small portion here that we have a sand filter because there's a small portion of this roadway that we weren't able to take back to these eastern basins. And so we controlled it here. So we are definitive that we will meet or exceed from the town standpoint, from the DEM standpoint, and the DOT standpoint. And we will not exacerbate any overland runoff to the abutting neighbors. In reality, that runoff from his property actually passes through our property. But I hope that answers your question. If not, I can dig in.
Well, Mr. Caselli, just one thing. Can you just explain to him that where your retention areas are, there needs to be, they can't be right on his property line, correct?
Correct. We're showing the basins and the areas of the location, but we're off the property line. We'll be grading the site so you can have that back wall and then the ponds. This is very pictorial. It's much more defined on the preliminary plans we submitted that shows grading along this entire western property line. From a grading standpoint, I know it may seem steep, but the topography does not show that. These are 10-foot contours, so you see maybe a 20-foot drop here. This is probably the steepest portion of the subdivision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caselli. I think you've answered all his questions.
Thank you.
Thanks. Joel, you have anything to add to that, or?
I don't have anything to add.
Mr. Toa, did that answer your question?
No. This person, Joel, which when I was a kid, that was Superman's father, she's just lying. Yeah, unless they cleared that tree yesterday, the tree is up there blocking my road. And the entrance being used, that's another lie, because there's, you know, they've done stuff this spring, so they're definitely using that entrance. And they cut the grass yesterday or a couple of days ago. So how else did they get in there except through Tioga Avenue? They haven't built any other access. So I'm wondering when they're building access. I mean, it's, you know, as this thing goes on, are they going to keep delaying it, or why don't they build it? And the other question I have is these boulders that they took out of the ground, and they're right on my property line on Tioga Avenue. So I'm wondering, they're going to have construction debris all over the place, as they build this thing on my, property line. Can they do that? As water, it shows, I don't care what they say, as far as the water, it showed right on the map, the arrow went out of their property onto my property, onto Tyoke Avenue. So you're saying they can't increase the water flow, but that's exactly the way they have it planned. Plus, just in general, the water comes from the hill when all the trees are removed. It's going to be, Noah's Ark. And then, by that time, they'll just shrug their shoulders and say, oh, well, what are you going to do? That's why I'm trying to get it straightened out at the beginning before they, do that. So that's about it. That's my comments.
Joel, could you address those concerns? I mean, go ahead. I'm just concerned about the tree and on his property line boulders. Could you just address that for the board, please?
We're not familiar with anything about the boulders. My client doesn't cut the grass up there. That would just seem a little odd. Why there would be a need. This isn't developed land up there, so there's been no mowing of the grass up there. I assume the current owners of the property may be doing that, but it's certainly not as with respect to this proposed development. So
there's no debris that's on his land that you know of.
Not as a result of developing this property.
And if there is, I'm sure you, the applicant, will take care of that, because I know he's done several projects in town and he's worked with the neighbors.
Right, and this, as this board knows, this isn't my client's first rodeo.
Right.
There's a reason he's developing a significant number of projects here, and he will continue to do so in a professional manner. We'll be back before you, I'm sure, on other projects, so that will all be noted.
Okay, am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Tuareg?
No, it's Turag, like the number 2.
Turag, okay. All right. Did that answer any of your questions, or if you have any concerns,
Well, the other thing is,
reach out to the developer.
They brought heavy machinery in there, and they put these ruts in my property. Are they going to fill those in? I mean, are they going to do it like the same time that they cut that tree, which is like 6 months ago? And this girl here, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She hasn't been at the property. She can't say what's there and what isn't. I was standing there today, and she's just like saying stuff off the top of her head without any backup or any knowledge of what the actual situation is.
I think my question is, Joel, or maybe Joe can answer it. Are you encroaching on Mr. Turag's property?
Mr. Chairman, as part of the master plan, he asked us to stake out the property. We did that within a week or two. We are clearly not on the property. We had sent him the survey as he requested. We had staked out the property line for his use. I have been to the property. I haven't been recently in the last couple of months, but I did not notice any land disturbance across the property lines.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Turag, anything else? I think the applicant have answered questions. I'm sure that they can.
Yeah, but they're telling me that there's no ruts on the property, and like I said, it's unless somebody's doing it as a prank. These heavy, machinery that cause these ruts, and they're not denying that they exist, as if I'm like imagining it, or it's like some kind of a Jurassic Park monster that made them. I mean, I don't know what they're saying, that this is just something I made up? And as far as cutting the lawn, that the front is definitely like hacked down. I mean, it was way overgrown, so it wasn't really cut, it was hacked down. And the only access is through my property. So, and they're just denying it, even though they're denying, you know, that it's like 8 o'clock. It's not really 8 o'clock, but it is.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important for Mr. Turog to understand that the applicant does not own the property at this point. So there are other owners of the existing property that can still go on the property, cut the grass. They may be mandated by town ordinance to cut the grass as this process goes through. And Mr. Turog, the applicant does not own the property yet.
Yeah, but you're just making that up. In other words, that's not what really happened.
I'm not making it up. I'm telling you he does not own the property yet.
No, I know that, but he's the one who's doing this, making this mess. So what am I supposed to say? He's not responsible because he doesn't own the property? I don't follow that law.
Mr. Chairman, you have my word as an officer of the court, my client who is 6 feet from me right now, that we will go out there first thing tomorrow and make sure there are no encroachments along the stake property line or any heavy machinery disturbances and so on and so forth.
I'd like to thank your client because I was hoping that he would do that. He's done it in many other projects. He's worked very good with the neighbors, and I don't expect him to do any less on this one.
That's
So,
correct.
Tell him thank you for me and the board.
When I talked to him, he was like, let forth this, you know, I asked him to remove that tree that was blocking the road. I guess, you know, he's such a wonderful guy. He let forth a string of obscenities. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was like Twilight Zone. So I'm glad you're going to come tomorrow, because if anything I've said is the least bit untrue, so please tell me.
Joel, would you confirm that you're going to be over there? And if you want someone from the town also to be there, I don't know if staff can, I can certainly be over there too, if that's something that your client would like.
Bob Du Bois. So my son brought to my attention, he met the excavator over there to do the test holes, and he may have misunderstood what the property line was, and possibly the excavator did go on that land. So my son will go up there tomorrow in the morning, take a look, and if there's any damage, we'll take care of it. As far as cutting grass, we haven't cut any grass. That's probably the current owners.
But as far as that goes, is there a specific time you're going to be there? Because I live right next door. I can meet you over there.
It won't be me, it will be my son. What time do you want to be there? 7:30 tomorrow morning.
And how about you? Are you, what's your name, Ron? Are you going to be there?
I will not be there. No, I've got to be somewhere else. But my son will be there tomorrow morning at 7:30.
Well, how about that other one, the one that Joelle? She said that she
I don't think she's going to be there about ruts in your lawn. If 7:30 tomorrow is acceptable, then that's how we'll do it. If it's not, then, you know, catch me another time. I don't know what to say. It doesn't seem like we can ever satisfy you.
If I could just jump in, Mr. Turog, I will certainly be there at 7:30 if Mr. Du Bois is okay with that. I'm sure he will take care of any of your concerns.
Okay. I will, you know.
Is that okay, Mr. Du Bois?
Yes.
But, I just don't like the fact that this person, Joelle, is saying that I'm making this stuff up, because she doesn't know what she's talking about. Never seen the property in her life, I assume, and yet she speaks with authority that the things I'm saying aren't true. So that kind of aggravates me.
Well, hopefully tomorrow morning at 7:30 we can clarify all the issues.
Okay, I don't think I can make it at 7:30.
Mr. DeBlois did state that there could have been a mistake, that ruts were made on your property, and he's willing to take care of that. So, I'm
Well,
sure this can be
What
handled.
time can you make it, Mr. Torrance?
How about, like, what's today? What, Thursday? How about Friday at 10 o'clock?
That cut out.
You cut out. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
What
Can you
day?
please repeat that?
Friday at 10 o'clock?
Go around Friday, 10 o'clock.
Friday at 10 a.m., okay, Mr. DeBlois?
Yeah, either myself or my son will be there.
Okay, see you then.
All right.
I will be there also, Mr. Turag, if that's okay with Mr. DeBlois.
It's perfectly fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Friday at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just asking our staff, is there anybody else publicly that would like to comment on this that you see? I can't hear you.
At this point, Mr. Chairman, there are no other hands raised for comment.
Okay, so I'll make entertain a motion to close public hearing.
So moved. This is Rick Colonian, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Glenn Anderson, second.
Okay, and I'll just poll everybody. Mr. Ozenkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye, sorry.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Colonian,
Aye.
and Mr. Flynn says aye. So public hearing is now closed. Okay, hearing that, anybody else on the board would have any other questions before I entertain a motion on this project?
Rick, you're muted.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, and I think earlier in the presentation, we talked about waivers. I believe there were 6. There are 5 listed in the planning director's report. And I think the attorney for the applicant indicated that Mr. Casale would delve into the one I have as number 1, which was talking about why they needed a waiver on the slopes. If he covered it, I apologize. I don't remember that it was covered. 3 lots, lot 1, 31, and 32.
Right, Mr. Glunian, so those lots are the northernmost lots. 2 of them are on the western property line, and I believe one of them is on the eastern property line. I'm not sure if you have the grading plan in front of you, but in essence, the town does not accept 2-to-1 slopes. They want everything 3-to-1, or they want a retaining wall. It seems foolish to put retaining walls in residential backyards. So for specifically lot 1 and lot 32 and 33, those are the lots closest to Tioga. We've graded them with a 2-to-1 slope, which in my opinion can be lumen seed and can be easily maintained. We don't anticipate this to be riprap. So rather than putting in retaining walls, we've asked the commission to consider a waiver.
Could I just get some clarification, because the report I have, and you could be correct, I have lots 1, 31, and 32. Is it 1, 31, and 33?
That's lot 1, lot 32, and lot 33.
Okay, must be a typo. So let me just make a note of that here. And I am not an engineer. Have we done that in the past, Mr. Chairman, or?
I believe we have. The staff, if staff would like to respond on that, but I believe we have changed the slope to 2-to-1. It doesn't sound like it's going to be an issue, seeing that it's going to be sloped with grass, but I'm certainly not a professional in that field.
Yeah, I mean, normally, respectfully, Mr. Chairman, it's odd to see this in subdivision regulations. I don't see it in many communities, if any. Normally, a 3-to-1 slope is what we achieve, what we try to achieve. Anything that's 1-to-1 or 1.5-to-1, we would probably riprap or stone, but something 2-to-1 can certainly be stabilized. So this would be, you know, a 45-degree angle. You'd certainly be able to walk on this and probably cut it with a weed whacker or a push lawnmower.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Colonian?
It does. What's the, Joe, if, just to kind of put it in perspective, I mean, we talking a couple of feet in one direction and a couple, sorry, 4 feet in one direction and 2 feet up, or are we talking about a significant pitch, like lengthwise?
Yeah, so like for lot 1, we probably have a 25-foot area in the rear of the lot, and you know, you can try to stack that with boulders and tear that a little bit, or you can just leave it natural and give some privacy the way it is. That's going to countersink that house about 12 feet, so it'll give it some nice privacy. Certainly, if the homeowner wanted to go through the expense of carving that out, they certainly could. What we find is the retaining walls become a maintenance issue, and then the insurance companies, it becomes a liability issue. So we don't, you know, try to stay away from retaining walls for private homeowners or for lots like this. And the same on lot 32. In the rear of the lot, you have the site dropping about 14 feet. So rather than stacking a tiered boulder system or some type of retaining wall, we would just slope that naturally.
Okay. And just for my own edification, again, there were, could I just get clarification? Weren't there 6 waivers? There were 4 simple ones that you hadn't processed. There was a slope one. Was there another one that I missed?
Yes, there's one not on the report. It is the submission of, it's another waiver from submission requirements. It's the submission of the Homeowners Association documents
That's right.
at final.
That's right. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any questions? If I can ask staff, would this be done final administrative, or would they be coming back for final?
I believe it's up to the board. They have not asked. It's ultimately, it's your decision. If you read in my staff report, I did say that you should give consideration to it because there are some permits they don't have in place, and there are the HOA docs. If the planning commission feels confident that the staff can review the HOA docs and leave it up to them, you know, the blessing of all the permits, then so be it. But it's ultimately, it's your decision.
Personally, I feel comfortable, certainly with our staff's capability to do this in final, but you know, I'd like to hear from the board on that. I'm sure the applicant would like to do it administrative for final. So if the board has any.
My question, Mr. Chairman, would be of the other projects that Mr. DuBois has done, do they have homeowners association where he's already been through the process of preparing homeowners docs, including an open space area and stormwater detention basins?
Yes, I believe he did that in an Oaks 1, and he also did that in Whitetail, I believe.
I would be fine with administrative.
Yes, that's correct. They're going to be almost virtually identical to those projects.
Anybody else from the board have any concerns?
Sandy Lukowitz, I'm comfortable with them going ahead with it.
Okay. All right, so it sounds to me like nobody from the board has any problems with final as administrative. If I'm not hearing anything else from the board, I'll entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Chairman, without objection, I will make a motion. I just want to double check something right here. We're here for.
Yeah, take your time, Rick.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we grant conditional approval of the preliminary plan application for the 33-lot major subdivision off Tyoke Avenue, Assessors Plat 32, lots 152, and Assessors Plat 23, lot 47 and 47.001 in the R20 zone. The project appears to be consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, as the future land use element identifies this neighborhood as medium-density residential, and the proposed land development project meets the criteria that defines a medium-density residential subdivision. This includes, but is not limited to, lot sizes, availability of public services, transportation access, public utilities. This proposed 33-lot subdivision is consistent with the town comprehensive community plan. The property will not likely have any significant environmental impacts. The subdivision will be serviced by public sanitary sewers, improve the quality of the stormwater leaving the site, implement best management practices, which may include either sand filters or bioretention filters, and provide for underground control of rooftop runoff. The subject property is zoned R20, and as proposed, this development will meet all of those dimensional requirements of the zoning ordinance. The proposed 30-lot subdivision has direct access to a principal arterial road named Tyoke Avenue. These roadways serve major centers of metropolitan areas, provide a high degree of mobility, and directly serve abutting land uses. As proposed, this project does not appear to create any degradation of levels of service on the adjacent roadway network and should not have a significant negative impact to the adjacent roadways. My motion comes with the following considerations that, or waivers, that Article 13B, 14B, 10 slopes in a subdivision, that the building lot, detention pond, etc., shall not be less than a 3-to-1 slope. In this case, the waiver would be applied to lots 1, 32, and 33 for a 2-to-1 slope. And also, the applicant be allowed to obtain the Department of Environmental Management permits prior to final approval as opposed to preliminary approval. The applicant be allowed to obtain their Kent County Water Authority permits prior to final approval instead of preliminary approval. That the applicant be allowed to obtain its design approval and capacity approval related to sewers at final approval instead of preliminary approval. That the applicant be allowed to obtain its DOT alterations permit prior to final approval instead of preliminary approval. That the applicant be allowed to submit their homeowners documents and, I jotted down there, homeowners documents at final approval as opposed to preliminary approval. That the applicant be allowed to proceed administratively without coming back before the board. And my final note was the motion is also contingent upon the applicant meeting with the Department of Public Works Director to see if they are able to reach an agreement on the improvements to East Shore Road.
Would you also like to add the director's report?
Yes, I'm sorry. And I would also like to incorporate the planning director's report into the motion.
Okay, I hear a motion by Mr. Clooney, and do I hear a second?
A second.
I have a second by Ms. Lukowitz. Okay, I will poll the board. Mr. Ozenkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Flynn, did you want to have any discussion?
Yes, any discussion before I poll? Thank you, staff. Hearing none? Okay, I have a yes from Mr. Ozenkowski. I have a yes from Mr. Anderson. Mr. Kenny.
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz.
Aye.
Mr. Colonian.
Aye.
And Chairman Flynn also says aye. So I believe the motion will pass.
Thank you.
Okay,
Will you be voting on the final plan delegation
I
or?
believe that was put into Mr. Kalunian's motion. That it will be done, final will be done administrative.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I will be seeing, be seeing the applicant on Friday at 10 o'clock.
We'll see you then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, do you have any objections if I also attend that meeting at 10 o'clock?
Not at all. I would love you to attend it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Du Bois?
Mr. Du Bois,
said that?
okay.
We just can't see who was speaking.
Ed Wozicka, I'm the interim town manager.
Oh, that's fine. Yes,
All right, excellent. I'll see you Friday at 10 o'clock then.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think if there's no other further questions, I'll take a motion for adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Glenn Anderson.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, do I have a second?
Second, Jim Kenny.
Okay, I have a second by Mr. Kenny. I'll do a quick poll. Mr. Ozenkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Kenny,
Aye.
Ms. Lukowitz,
Aye.
Mr. Kalunian.
I guess so. Aye.
Chairman Flynn also said aye. We're adjourned.
Take care, everybody. Nice to see you all.